I mean, I love the fact that in the middle of loads of verbal sparring and literary jokes, there is a moment where the audio track dims and it is just the sound of people hitting each other with saucepans for about a minute. And it's just a full-on silent film comedy sequence.
That sounds like my sex life.
At the height of drama where they're trying to kill Napoleon. I just think it's, like I say, brave. I keep coming back to that.
Two Fat Ladies, it's episode 88.
Hey everyone, and welcome to this episode of Flixwatcher podcast. Today I am joined by Alix. Nice. Ollie.
Hello.
And Helen.
Meow.
And we're going to be talking about love and death. Guys, if you want to get in touch, join us on Twitter at FlixWatcherPod. Come and visit us on our website, flixwatcher.tv, and go to iTunes. Subscribe to us, review, and share with your friends, because sharing is caring.
As always, films reviewed in this podcast were available to stream on Netflix UK at the time of recording. There may be bad language and there may be spoilers. You have been warned. Hello film fans, welcome to this episode of Flixwatcher Pod. In our studio today we have Alix and Ollie. If you would like to tell the lovely listeners where they might have heard your voices before, please.
In their dreams, in their wildest fantasies. And also, together in the sex bit of my podcast, The Modern Mann, M-A-N-N, it's a pun on my name, Alix is our resident sex-spert.
I am indeed. So I answer listeners' questions about everything from why they might compulsively sneeze every time they orgasm to how to go about arranging a threesome for the first time. To
interesting.
Yeah, how to keep it up, how to get down to it, how to go in, out, and shake it all about.
I don't remember the question about how do I shake it all about. I think people are born knowing.
I didn't know you needed to shake it all about.
You learn all sorts of things, let me tell you.
Apart from with a hokey cokey. In, out, shake all about.
If you do too much hokey cokey, then it's very, very difficult to gain an erection. So avoid too much of that. I also am a co-host on a podcast on Radio 1, BBC Radio 1, called Unexpected Fluids, where me and a lovely gay chap called Riyad Khalaf go through real life tales of people's sexual fails. And it's a comedy show, so we have a good giggle together. But then there's an educational aspect in that we discuss how sex portrayed by the media is all about everything being perfect and polished and glossy and without gloop. And we all know that in real life, it's very, very different. There's clumsy fumbles and tumbles. Yeah, all sorts of oohs alongside the oohs. So it's basically an honest, frank conversation about sex, how it doesn't always turn out how you'd planned, and what we can do collectively to make it all much more enjoyable for us.
I mean, personally, I'm just grateful if it happens at all, generally. But I think that's why I've learned a lot actually doing the podcast is, I when people write in about these things that really matter to them, it's not just because you can dismiss it easily. And so it's a question about a weird fetish. You know, this person wants to experiment with foot play or being dominated or anal sex, whatever it is. But of course, to that person, this is something that they care about enough that they've listened to Alix giving advice over a number of years now and written into us to hear her take on it to help them in the bedroom. Yeah. And I've been sort of seduced really into learning about stuff that frankly so occasionally it's just got a bit too grim, even for me, when we go right deep into the orifices and there's certain things people want to know about that are very precise. But in general terms, the tips that I've learned have been really useful. I don't necessarily mean in the bedroom, but I just mean as an understanding of my fellow human. Yeah. And essentially, if I may boil Alix's advice down, and she does know a lot, but essentially what it often comes down to week after week after week is have better communication with your partner. Yeah. And it's astonishing actually how many problems and questions can be boiled down into that. It's amazing how many people are more prepared to ask us a question about what they really want to do in the bedroom rather than talk to their partner about it.
Yeah, I often say that sex is the most common form of transport because it's how we all got here. And yet so many people, even though they were all the product of a cum shot, will not talk about sex.
With their partners even, yeah.
Or with themselves. Lots of people just, their relationship with their own body, with the knowledge of their own desires is far more sparse than it ought to be for them to have a satisfying, fulfilling and honest life. And by speaking more openly about these things, you really can transform people's existences. I know that sounds like an overstatement, but sex is about more than just what goes on in the bedroom, and it's about more than just a physical act. It's how you feel about yourself and understand yourself and how you relate to those closest to you in a lot of circumstances. So,
I mean, this all sounds terribly worthy. I mean, I should say there are episodes where literally Alix has just foisted some lubricant into my hands and said, "What's that? It's amazing. It's really sticky." So it's not like the most constantly serious show.
Yeah,
but
there's a lot of pissing around, pissing ourselves and talking about piss.
Yes, but we cover, sex in a serious way when it's required, and in a light-hearted way when appropriate.
Way.
Yes, I think so.
Providing sex education to people who probably had a pretty terrible sex education at school.
Well, just by virtue of being British, actually.
Yeah.
And having this sort of disease that we don't like talking about stuff, generally speaking,
we talk
even
about
as Toby says to our own partner.
Well.
we do talk about STDs too.
So we're here talking about love and death. Sometimes in love there is sex.
Yes.
I'm not going to go to the death side of that.
Well,
it's a bit grim. I don't know if you've had any.
Yes, we've covered everything.
Well, yeah, we talked about. Well, actually, another word for orgasm is little death. So
yeah, petit mort.
Yeah, precisely.
I did French, or looked in a French book. And Love and Death, as written and directed by Woody Allen. Ollie, this was your choice. Can you give us a 2-minute synopsis and tell us why you chose this film?
I can give you a 2-minute synopsis of the plot as I understand it, but of course the whole thing's a parody of Tolstoy, and I've actually never read War and Peace. So
Who has? Have you?
I didn't even think that was okay. Good, keep going.
Didn't even notice.
I've already learned.
Okay.
I definitely know Toy Story more than Tolstoy.
Well, actually, having seen the BBC One adaptation by Andrew Davis of War and Peace helped a little bit in understanding some of the gags.
Right.
But I mean, you don't. The film. In Woody Allen's canon comes after Sleeper and Everything You Always Wanted to Know About Sex and the slapstick stuff. Yeah. And just immediately before Annie Hall and Manhattan and the sort of widely regarded critical purple patch of those were his best movies. Yeah. It's right in the middle of that, and it feels like it's right in the middle of that tonally. So there is a story. Woody plays Boris Dmitrovich, who is the kind of weedy younger brother of Mikhail and Ivan in rural Russia. He's a bit of a dweeb and a nerd. He doesn't want to go to war when war comes with Napoleon, but he does. He's in love with Diane Keaton, who loves someone else, and then they plot to kill Napoleon. That's basically the plot.
Well done.
Thank you. But because the plot is because the film is in that line of his work, absolutely straddling the slapstick and the verbal comedy, really the plot's not that important in the way that the plot of Sleeper isn't that important. There's a lot of stuff in this which is setups of visual gags or basically ideas, which, and this is why I think Woody Allen's a great filmmaker, because he does films that don't work. But in the films that don't work, you can always see the genesis of the idea. He's a filmmaker that takes an idea and makes it into a reality. And generally speaking, I'd say in Love and Death, these ideas work. It's, whatever you think of the idea of a parody of Russian literature across, 100 minutes, it's funny. It succeeds as a funny film. It makes me laugh every time I see it. I chose it because it was my favourite film when I was 20.
Oh, wow.
And so when I went to university, I had it on VHS, and it would be the one that I would show everybody. And I saw that it was on Netflix, and I was like, okay, this is an opportunity. We've been invited onto this show to rewatch it. And I haven't seen it for 17 years. And of course, I didn't like it as much as I liked it when I was 20. But that in itself was interesting. I was watching it thinking, why, when I was 20, did I like it?
Funniest thing ever.
Yeah. And I think it's partly the sort of stoner kind of, if you watch it 2 a.m, it's intrinsically funnier. But it's also that it makes you think you're clever. And, as an undergraduate, I thought I was getting all the jokes about Russian literature despite never having actually read Tolstoy. It does that. And I think a lot of Woody Allen films from that era do that. They flatter the audience's intelligence and say, probably because he was largely talking to a New York intellectual audience, you get these jokes, you're clever. Here's a funny joke for you, and then we'll follow it up with a knob gag.
I think one of the great things about Netflix is that you can delve deep. You can see the films you haven't seen. I've never seen this before. But you can also revisit the films that you did, like you say, had on VHS. For me, I would have been recorded from Channel 4, and I would have tried to edit out all the adverts in between. But, I would have had them on VHS and watched them to death. Like Dirty Rotten Scoundrels was one of those.
I love that movie.
So that's one thing I really love about Netflix, as well as the new stuff which they bring to the table, Pixar stuff, whatever. So it's really cool that you've chosen it for that reason. And it's always interesting to see your thoughts on a film that you used to love when you were younger, and then revisit it based on not having seen it for decades, over a decade, and do you feel? Does it feel a bit sad that it didn't hit you in the same way as when you were younger?
Not really, because I think the other thing that's happened alongside me maturing in that time is comedy is just much more widely available and much more sophisticated now. And
so you're talking about 2001-ish.
Yeah. I mean,
so
even though it's...
Friends was pretty much the zenith of comedy at the time.
So even though it's a film from the 70s, if you wanted clever, smart comedy that also had knob gags, really, I'd say you had to kind of look to The Simpsons, I suppose. And actually, what's quite interesting about this, whereas now, point being, there's loads of comedies that sort of tick all those boxes and that are for people that like a word joke and slapstick. But what I found quite interesting about watching this was that it reminded me most of animated comedy because it straddles those two worlds. And so there were moments, for example, that during the big war on the battlefield, there's a gag where Woody, playing Boris down in the field, says something along the lines of, the battlefield looks so different when you're in the middle of it to how it does to the generals up in the hill. Cut to shot of sheep being seen from the top of a hill. All the soldiers being seen as sheep by the generals. That's like an animated comedy joke, isn't it? It's a visual gag that people don't do anymore in live action comedy, but actually we're saturated in it because of things like YouTube. And it's like an Instagram joke, that joke. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's full of little moments like that.
Alex, what are your thoughts?
Well, I have to admit that I had never before seen a Woody Allen film.
Oh, what?
Really? Yeah, this was my initiation. I've been resistant.
I mean, please watch Annie Hall. That's all I'd say. Like, forget everything else and just watch Annie Hall, especially you.
Actually, I have seen bits of Annie Hall for sartorial reasons, but there are a number of reasons that I have resisted watching Woody's canon, for want of a more repulsive phrase. And one of them is because of the allegations made against Woody Allen. And when I told friends that I needed to watch this film, it started a really interesting debate about, for a start, how much credibility should be given to the claims made against Woody Allen. I mean, I am, as a feminist, somebody who is very inclined to believe anybody making a claim of abuse or assault.
Certainly in the public domain.
Yes, under the circumstances that pertain to this, yes. And sorry, I'm trying to pick my words really carefully here. Woody Allen's relationship with his previous stepdaughter, who is now his wife, is undeniably unusual. Untangling how appropriate or inappropriate it is a very difficult thing to do without knowing them personally. So the debate about Woody brings up...
Well, the debate about Woody is the same debate about Gary Glitter or Michael Jackson, isn't it? It's sort of, do you revisit the art of someone who has had a very serious allegation like that made against them in the public eye? And in Gary Glitter's case, not an allegation, but something that actually definitely happened and he went to prison for.
Yes, that's why I think this is a more complicated.
But to me, the answer to that question is, it depends how good the art is. I know that's not the moral answer, but like in Gary Glitter's case, the music's not good enough to listen to it. In Michael Jackson's case, Whatever Happened, Billie Jean is a great song. And I think in Woody Allen's case, some of the later work, you can probably live without. I think as a filmmaker, what he was doing was so audacious and ambitious that you can't just say, I'm just going to pretend this art didn't happen. It was so influential. And also, I think there are some of his work, which I can say to you, if you've never seen any of it before, is icky, viewed from this revisionist standpoint.
We did Manhattan recently.
Yes, Manhattan's the one I was thinking of.
Very dubious on the rewatch.
I'd go as far to say it's a cry for help.
So the story of Manhattan is Woody Allen, aka 50-year-old Woody Allen, is going out with a high schooler, and all his friends weren't saying, dude, what the fuck are you doing? You're going out with a high schooler. They're going, oh, she seems quite nice. And I watched Manhattan ages ago and I thought, oh, this is quite a good film. It looks quite nice, nicely shot. But on the rewatch for really one of the earliest episodes of Flixwatcher, I was just like, it's
uncomfortable.
Yeah, I just did not go on with it.
There are uncomfortable lines in Love and Death.
Are there?
Yes, there are.
It's so comic book and silly.
Well, there...
These sex scenes in it are carry-on style sex scene.
Yeah, but okay. So, but what's uncomfortable about that?
Nothing. They're childish almost. They're almost like a schoolboy.
I'd say though that
joke.
the women in it are empowered in the sex scene. So, what's the bit that makes you feel bad?
There were two lines that made me feel particularly uncomfortable and a little bit nauseous because I thought the joke would have worked if
Sound like Woody now.
If you'd substitute.
I feel nauseous. I can't watch my own movies without feeling nauseous.
That's not a bad impression.
That's very good. I think that the joke would have still worked if you'd substituted a slightly different age, for example. There's a bit where an old man is asked about sex and he says something along the lines of, I had to live many years and after many trials and tribulations, I've come to the conclusion that the best thing in life is blonde 12-year-old girls, 2 of them wherever possible.
Yeah, but the joke's on him. Like at that moment, that's his last words before he croaks. You're not supposed to think, oh, those are great last words to say. You're supposed to think, what a waste of your life that you're just basically an old pervert and you've been put as, this is a man of the cloth dying. So he's been elevated to a position and it's deliberately puncturing that pomposity, isn't it? It's not supposed to be like, yeah, good on you for fancying 12-year-old girls. That's how I took it anyway.
No, it's not framing that as something to be celebrated, but it's still very difficult when you've heard in the press as much about Woody Allen as is circulating currently, to wonder about the mind of a man who invented that joke and chose to reference 12-year-old blonde girls specifically. There's another
but
bit
it is
where
also
there's
set
tussle.
at a period of time where 12-year-old girls were getting married. I mean, that's the other joke that's going on. Is it's jokes about period
now
comedy.
is still a time where 12-year-old girls are getting married in
but
certain
that's
countries.
not his concern in this film. His concern in this film is to do a costume drama and take the piss out of the times in which it's set. So I do think that's part of what he's doing.
I can appreciate that this works on lots of different levels, and I know what you're saying, but I can't deny that from my point of view as someone whose unfortunately main impression of Woody Allen in the modern world is a man who against whom some serious allegations have been made, it's just really difficult not for that joke not to land in an uncomfortable manner with me. Similarly, the scene where there's a tussle with Woody Allen and his female partner, and someone interrupts it and he says, oh, hold on, there's no problem. She's 18. And when you're thinking about the mind of that man in his private life, it's really difficult to distance yourself from how that might have affected his work. It's just, you do wonder whether it's an echo of reality, that's all.
I mean, I'd love you to watch some more Woody Allen films because there's some seriously uncomfortable stuff in the later ones. I mean, he's very open about those issues that he has in his films. He makes films about those issues. It's not hidden away.
Yeah, Manhattan one, Whatever Works, is a very modern one that has Larry David, who's when Woody Allen's not in the film, there's typically a Woody Allen person.
Yeah, a proxy.
A proxy, yeah, and that was Larry David, who was in his 60s, going out with someone who was in their 20s. So legal, quote unquote, but still like, dude, what's going on? This argument.
But that was a terrible film anyway.
Yeah, it was. But this thing about
There's 3 stars.
The separating the artist from the arts is one for me which is always a difficult conversation. I was in the gym today and like say it wasn't Billie Jean, but it was another Michael Jackson song that came on. I was like, yeah, this is good to lift the weights to. But then I was like, I still have that thing of like, Michael Jackson was my favorite pop star as growing up, but I still think, dude, just why?
Well, I don't know. I'm undecided on how. No, Woody Allen.
Yeah. It's difficult.
It's a difficult one.
I don't have all the answers. No. All I know is that I experienced simultaneously being entertained with feeling uncomfortable at those moments. That was my experience of it.
I think that's a lot of the problem. I think the problem with people like Woody Allen is that he is the creator of the art as well. So it's not like there's a lot of like sitcoms where one character, one actor was a perpetrator, but you can almost like separate them from the rest of the cast because the cast was there to do their thing. But Woody Allen he wrote, directed, sang the theme tune, or he did everything behind it. So that it can, if you're accepting Woody Allen, then you're accepting everything he does. But with I want to say like I'd still love to watch the Cosby Show, but Bill Cosby was behind everything that happened to do with that show. Does that make sense?
Yes,
in some way,
it's the strength of influence upon the work that has been created.
So like the film, like Usual Suspects, for example, with Kevin Spacey in it. I'm gonna watch Usual Suspects again because it's a fucking great film. Kevin Spacey's in it, but he had just to play that character of Verbal Kint in that film. So I'm not going to really think about...
But would you watch American Beauty again?
Yes. But it'd be seen on with very different eyes. To me, that's still... He didn't direct it. He's the main person behind it. We're kind of going off track with Love and Death. But so what did you feel about Love and Death as a film... Trying to think outside of the...
Well, one of the other reasons that I've been resistant to watching Woody Allen in the past is because he's kind of grouped in mentally for me with Morrissey, in that he's somebody who's undeniably talented and clever, but also so smugly grating that you could use him to shred cheddar. And both of these men are artists that previous boyfriends of mine have absolutely revered to the point of annoyance. You know, they've been prostrate at the feet of Woody Allen and hopefully not literally and Morrissey, and it has just put me off really strongly. There were a lot of complex feelings I experienced whilst watching Love and Death. But
you brought a lot of baggage to watching this film, may I say?
Oh my God, yeah.
It is a silly comedy about...
allowance.
Go on, yeah.
But I did actually find myself really appreciating...
Did you laugh? It's a comedy. Did you laugh? That is the main test.
Riley, I appreciated the clever linguistic jokes. I also liked the juxtaposition, as you mentioned earlier, of these very philosophical, finely crafted, carefully honed jests alongside this very clownish slapstick stuff. The whole comedic approach of it, I could really, really see why people I'd been attracted to liked it, and then that made me feel ultra weird.
Helen, where does this rank in your Woody Allen canon? Have you seen this before?
I've seen this before, yeah. I don't think it's as good as Sleeper, but it's made from that kind of era of it. But I mean, I quite like this film, and it's like you've mentioned on it. It's one of those films that it rewards you for knowing the references, and you're like, "Oh, that's a clever little thing on that." And it's very much a film student's kind of favourite film. It was quite a relief watching it.
Were you a film student at 20, Ollie?
No, but I was studying English literature, but I wanted to study film.
Okay.
But I actually even had on my UCAS form to study English and film together, and then I never got the place. So I ended up doing English. But I always thought, if ever I do a postgrad, it's going to be in film and I'll get to watch films all day. And I think also the student mentality is kind of important, because even though Woody Allen's about 35, I think, when he made this, it's
hard life.
It's like he wrote it when he was sort of 17, 18. And I think he probably did, because have you seen Shadows and Fog, which was, really a much more difficult watch, which is an expressionist film that he made in the sort of early 90s with Madonna.
No, I've not seen that one.
It's weird, but it's got some great gags in it. And that is based on a play that he wrote called Death, which he wrote as a teenager. And this has the same vibe. It has Death as a character. It's got these sort of slightly theatrical jokes in it that seem to me to come from the brain of someone who's a late teenager or early 20s. So I have a feeling that a lot of the ideas in this probably got put in a script, they got put in a drawer. And then, 15 years later, we had the permission to make it.
Have you seen the Woody Allen documentary?
Right, there is the... Right.
He does literally have the drawer and like, oh yeah, that was an idea. Let's put that in.
And we're back to who's seen Woody Allen's drawers.
So, sorry.
It was quite a relief watching it that it was quite okay in terms of, obviously, the lines you mentioned. It could have been much worse. Going back and revisiting it. When it's quite, he said that at the time, this was the funniest film that he'd made. So
I thought it was very
bar.
saturated. I did really appreciate that. I felt like there wasn't a line that was in it at all that didn't have some comedic value or some purpose.
Which takes me back to The Simpsons and those sorts of things.
Yeah, exactly.
It's dense with gags that move the plot along, which you don't tend to see in comedies these days.
And some really ridiculously funny ones, like being shot out of a cannon and things like that, and getting your sword tangled up, are really funny. They're simple, but they're funny.
But also audacious. Like I say, Death is a character in it, and it's easy to sort of say that like this is a normal thing. It's not a normal thing. Like an audience who went along to see a film comedy in the 70s, especially from the guy who brought you everything you wanted to know about sex, probably weren't expecting a monologue about death delivered to death. in person at the end of the film. It's a brave thing to do. And now it makes sense because it's Woody Allen and that's the kind of thing he does.
Yeah.
But at the time, it was basically taking, sort of intelligent, liberal New York stand-up and putting it in a mainstream comedy release, which strikes me as an interesting choice.
Well, also, he's stolen death from The Seventh Seal, which is obviously another one of his favourite places to steal from Bergman films. But the death is in a white sheet as opposed to the black one.
Yeah, and all those references completely passed me by, but I know that he's obsessed with Bergman, so I imagine there was a lot of that going on.
Is also stolen in Bill and Ted's Bogus Journey, death.
Yes.
And playing the game to save life. I've never seen Seventh Seal.
Very influential.
But I think some of the problems relate to potentially Woody Allen in his mindset, but I think some of the problems also relate to this is the 70s, and some things that watched then simply wouldn't watch now. Mm-hmm. And a film we watched recently was Stir Crazy, an 80s film, Richard Pryor and Gene Wilder.
It's awful.
Neither of us had seen it before, but we were like, well, it's going to be casually racist, sexist, homophobic, misogynist, all this kind of thing. And it was surprisingly, it wasn't that. But when you revisit an old film of the 80s and 70s, you kind of think, well, buckle in, you're going to get something that you're going to go at. And I think some of those comments were those things you said. That certainly wouldn't wash Woody Allen. If he was to remake this now, he certainly wouldn't put those lines in there because that's.
Or perhaps he would.
Yeah, he probably would.
He seems like. I mean, he's somebody who's always denied the allegations made against him.
And Woody Allen wouldn't make this film now. I mean, that's the point, isn't it? Woody Allen's evolved as a filmmaker into something completely different.
No, it's a different style of filmmaking.
That's why this film is so precious to me, because it exactly straddles the two types of filmmaking that he made. And it's the only one, really, that is sort of 50% of each. I mean, I love the fact that in the middle of loads of verbal sparring and literary jokes, there is a moment where the audio track dims and it is just the sound of people hitting each other with saucepans for about a minute. And it's just a full-on silent film comedy sequence.
That sounds like my sex life.
At the height of drama, where they're trying to kill Napoleon. I just think it's, like I say, brave. I keep coming back to that, but I do think at the time, it must have felt like a really original piece of filmmaking.
Sure.
And I think some of that verve is still there, albeit now you watch it and you think, it's only 100 minutes long as well. So you watch it and you kind of, or it's even less actually, I think. So you watch it and you kind of think, I'd take 20 minutes off this and it would be episode 1 in a series of things where you spoof a different novel each week. You know, That's kind of the style of it. But at the time, like to make a film where you had to have a big film crew and go on location and do all this stuff, it was an audacious thing to do. The other thing as well that I think is worth mentioning whilst we're criticising, well, not criticising, it's not fair because I totally see where you're coming from, and Woody Allen has a context now which is different. So it's a legitimate thing to do. But looking at it through this modern lens, whilst we're doing that, the other thing to remember, I think, is that he's actually a very inclusive filmmaker for the 70s. You know, he writes amazing roles for women, always has. More women have won Best Actress Oscars in Woody Allen films than in any other filmmaker's movies.
That's an interesting point.
And Diane Keaton in this movie is incredible.
Yeah, she's
and
great.
is given laughs in a way that most male comedians writing things for their muse would not. You know,
they'd hold it for themselves, wouldn't they?
Yeah, because she's the object of desire too. She's certainly sexualized, but she's funny. She's allowed to be funny, and she's brilliant.
She's also allowed to have a high sex drive.
Yes, exactly. And that's the other thing. Yeah, the women in the film enjoy sex, and it's on their terms. And also, even, I mean, it's only a brief moment, but even in terms of racial integration as well, there's that joke, and it is a joke, where there's a black army drill sergeant who's training the Russian army, and he's a proper kind of jive-talking New York-style African-American. Now, the joke is obviously, that's an incongruous bit of casting. That's the joke. But he was doing it.
Yeah.
He thought, you know, let's have a black actor play that part. And the joke is not, you know, let's laugh because he's black. The joke is everyone is saying, let's bring modern sensibility to a period tale.
I think maybe let's head to the scores at this point.
Sure. So these are, we'll welcome you to the spreadsheet of dreams. All of the scores are out of 5. You can have a decimal place if you wish. And we will start with recommendability for you, Ollie. So out of 5, how much would you recommend this?
I think this is a film that everyone could see once. So yes, I would put this at 5.
Alix?
Artistically, I found this a really interesting and arguably important film for me to see. And I enjoyed finally discovering what all the Woody Allen fuss is about artistically. However, can I see myself going out of my way to recommend that people watch the films of Woody Allen?
They're looking for a number here, Alex.
1.
Helen.
So I have to score this in my kind of scoring of Woody Allen with that. Obviously, Annie Hall would be a 5.
Annie Hall is better, I can see that.
Yeah.
Annie Hall's the masterpiece.
Yeah. And also, I do think out of the slapstick ones, that Sleeper is probably more of my favourite sort of one. But it is a really interesting film, and like you say, where it comes in his career, it's just a really, really interesting time for him and the films that he made. So I'm going to go 3.5 for that one.
I'm going to go 2.9. I think I enjoyed it more than I thought I was going to be honest with you. I've seen Sleeper. I wasn't that big a fan of his slapstick stuff. My first entry into Woody Allen was Annie Hall, which is, I guess, it's just setting the bar really high because I'd heard lots about him, but in my family we just hadn't seen. It was like Transformers, and then it was like The Cosby Show, and then it was The A-Team, and then it was Friends. But so Woody Allen never kind of features on the radar, and he just kept getting award after award after award, and then finally succumbed to Annie Hall, and I was just like, shit, this is amazing. But then everything else since that is rubbish. Not rubbish, but everything else since that.
They've made good films since then.
I played it a bit
Can I
harshly,
just
but
briefly put in a word for Bullets Over Broadway as well?
Yeah, that's great.
I actually genuinely, if we're talking great films, I think Annie Hall and Bullets Over Broadway.
I think it was Bullets Over
really
Broadway
like
where
Midnight
he won,
in Paris.
I think Bullets Over Broadway where he won the Oscar, and I was like, I don't know who this Woody Allen guy is. I love Midnight in Paris.
And Sweet and Low Down is great.
So
that is an offbeat choice.
He's got good films, but I prefer the kind of let's be cerebral in Manhattan vibe to the slapstick vibe.
Yeah, but what's wrong with let's be cerebral and then make jokes about a guy who's obsessed by herring? I think that's the perfect combination.
That was funny.
When he goes to bed talking to the herring, that's a good gag.
So recommendability score, 2.9. Like I say, Annie Hall's there, Midnight in Paris is there. This isn't, for a few different reasons. I think there's better slapstick. I think there's better spoof stuff that I would recommend higher. Mm-hmm. Naked Gun, Airplane, Black Dynamite. Repeat viewing score, Ollie.
Well, that's a harder one for me because, as I said, when I was 21, I could quote you the whole film and I'd seen it 10 times. I now, having seen it at the age of 37, would probably happily see it again, but probably not till I'm in my 50s. So what does that say? I'll give it a repeat viewing score of 3 on balance, to be fair. But in my life right now, it's probably a 2.
Alex, will you watch this again?
I think I'm more likely to watch other films from Woody Allen's oeuvre.
Yeah.
I've got the DVD box set. You can borrow it.
However, because I found some of the lines exceptionally clever and they were delivered at a really speedy pace, I would perhaps watch it again to make sure there was nothing I had missed. And also, I'd like to watch it again in the context of the conversation that we've had with that influence. So I'm gonna go 2 for me.
Sure. H.
I'm going to give it a 3. I've seen it before. I did have it on VHS, part of my Woody Allen collection. And it must have been, I've got it on DVD as well, I can't remember. It's been a few years since I've seen it. I quite enjoyed watching it again, and I probably will watch it again maybe in like another 10 years or maybe not, I'm not sure.
So was that 3?
Yeah.
I think what you found, Ollie, in terms of the films you used to watch as a kid, when it was on VHS and it's one of the 10 or even 20 films, meant that over the summers, meant that you how many times have you seen Fight Club?
Oh, too many.
How many times what's the most have you seen it in a week?
Maybe like 5 or 6 times or something.
So it was one of those things you just used to watch the same film or the same episode of a TV show so many times, but now A, older, B,
time is precious.
The ability to watch literally anything you want at a moment's notice really depletes that step. I can't see myself watching it again anytime soon. I might do. I'm definitely. I will watch it again at some point, but I can't tell you when that's going to happen. So that's a 1 for me, I think. Small screen score. Do you want an explanation of the small screen score?
No, I think I get it. Yeah, I think it works on the small screen fine. Yeah, I mean, it's not a film that you need to see in the cinema. Let's put it that way.
Sure.
And actually, the intimacy of some of the shots it's almost like they were made for the small screen anyway. There's a scene where Diane Keaton is actually crying real tears, real acting crying tears, but it's a hugely funny piece of script where they're both staring down the barrel of the lens of the camera, and I'd say that probably works better actually in your sitting room than it would have done on a cinema screen.
Is that the scene where she's looking out the screen, but Woody Allen's looking off to the side?
Yes. And the joke being, he's a spoiler, but if you're listening to this show, then you've probably seen the film. He survived the war and he wasn't supposed to. He was supposed to be dead, and now he's got to marry him and have sex with all the time.
So what's that give you? What's that rating for you? For 5?
Small screen. Well, I mean, it's strange to say 5 because I wouldn't say brilliant small screen entertainment, but yeah, it works just as well on the small screen as big screen. So yeah, 5. What the hell?
Alex, do you feel you missed out by not seeing this in the cinema?
I think that this would have been an interesting film to watch in the company of other people, because I would have liked to debate it.
I mean,
that's comedy, isn't it, actually? In fairness, yeah.
I watched this on my own, on my laptop at home, and I think I would have welcomed other people's thoughts and input. I think I would have appreciated the film in a different way had you been there, for example, Ollie. So I think it missed out I think I missed something from it in the manner in which I watched it. So I'm going to give it 3 there, 3.5 maybe.
That collective experience is something we've talked about a few times. Not necessarily that you need to be there for the visuals, but to be there in a horror film when other people are scared, or be there in a good comedy when other people are laughing can help to augment something.
I'm going to give it a 5 for everything that Ollie said, and also as someone who tried to build up an extensive Woody Allen collection many, many years ago and found it quite difficult to get hold of some titles. I'm now quite pleased that some of them are on Netflix, should you wish to find them.
There's quite a load actually on Netflix.
Spent a lot of money on eBay.
What was the one that was really hard to get hold of?
Play it again, Sam.
No, I mean, I had that on video. It was trying to get them from VHS to DVD, and they only really released the first and second box sets. And then they haven't really released much of the 90s stuff, I don't think, on DVD, or at least when I was trying to get hold of them and update them.
Yeah, I'm saying 5. I can't see any real benefit of seeing it in the cinema. I don't think it was that funny. So the collective experience would have kind of not been a factor really for me. Engagement score. How engaged were you whilst watching it?
Well, having said that I loved this film in the past, even in the past, I remember thinking it was a bit like a box of chocolates. You certainly wouldn't want it to go on any longer. And, I still feel like there's sometimes with musicals, I love musicals. And I love Disney films. Have you seen Hamilton yet? I haven't. I'm looking forward to that. But in the same way as with musicals, what was that Stephen Sondheim one? Into the Woods recently. That was I enjoyed the first 10 minutes of that and then was completely nauseated by it because it was just too much. Kobe's getting out his Hamilton t-shirt.
just carries it around.
I know what it is. I don't need to see a piece of cloth with a logo on it. Anyway, good. I'm glad that I should be excited. But anyway, in the same way as musicals, which I love, but sometimes at the interval, I'm just I need to just go and sit in a quiet room.
Yeah.
I think, it's relentless gag, and it's all very fast and everything. So I would say, although it is engaging, I found myself drifting off occasionally during a particularly clever one-liner where I thought, he's done the payoff and I can't remember what the setup was.
Sure.
Because it's so relentless. So I'd say 4.
Helen. Sorry, Alex, is you.
I was much more beguiled than I wanted to be by the very jokes that Ollie has just spoken about. That verbal jousting is, I'm a really big fan of that kind of thing. So this film reeled me in much more than I expected to be, and even though I rallied against it, it did engage me much more than I thought. So I'm going to give it 4 there. Actually, I enjoyed a lot of the dialogue.
I am also going to go for a 4. I've seen it a couple of times, so I kind of vaguely knew what was coming, and it does kind of have that, you can kind of drift off a little bit and then it sort of comes back to you kind of thing.
I thought you were out.
Well, and also, sorry.
I was going to say 1 hour and 24 minutes. So
that's all it is,
yeah.
I think the time factor does play a lot into the repeat viewing score and the engagement score. The time factor can, that's when it wins out. I'm going to 3.8. I think I was in there. I did zone out a few times.
It doesn't matter if you do, though, in a way, because the plot is almost nonsensical.
Yeah.
And the jokes are very self-contained. And I like that about it, that you could pick up at any moment and there would be something there to entertain you.
Yeah.
One bit that really tickled me that was very silly was the idiots convention with the sign saying "Welcome, idiots." I might invest in one of those to just hang over my house, to be honest.
But you want to bring the idiots into your house?
They come anyway.
Okay. So they might as well be signposted. Okay, that gives us an overall score of 3.48, but we reached out to Twitter, as you guys helped us out with, and we asked people, we said we're reviewing Love and Death with Olly Man and Alix Fox from the Modern Mann podcast. Have you seen it? Tell us your thoughts for an on-air shout-out on Flixwatcher. We had a couple of responses. Olly, can you read out this first one?
Yeah, this is at Contrarian Prime, said, early Woody, haven't seen it in forever, but it was entertaining with a hilarious ending. 3 stars, maybe. Now, the hilarious ending, the actual ending, of course, is him dancing with death, and it's not hilarious, it's really protracted. But I presume what they're talking about is the monologue. There's a great down-the-camera monologue, which Woody does just before he's about to be executed, which is basically the end of a stand-up routine, isn't it? But it is properly lol.
I need to watch that again. This is
also,
probably
actually,
this is
I
probably
stand
my
corrected.
disengagement section.
So there's the big monologue that he does just before he's about to be executed.
Yeah.
And then when he's actually dead, he then does another monologue down the camera. And I only realised this on repeat viewings, and I have not looked on IMDb to see if it's true. But I noticed that it's a really tight shot on his face, and the rest of the film isn't that tight. And if you look behind him, it doesn't look like Russia anymore. You can see a bit of blue sky. And I did wonder if in the edit they were like, you can't end the film with you dancing with death. It's too weird. You need to tell the audience it's over. And I think he popped out around the back of Paramount or whatever and filmed it in LA, because that's what it looks like to me. Just a little nerdy thing that I noticed.
Alex, what we have got one more bit of feedback from Twitter.
I'm still trying not to laugh at the phrase "early Woody." It sounds like something I talk about in the Foxhole. Gidget von LaRue has said, "That is my favourite Woody Allen movie." Many exclamation marks.
Doesn't give a star rating though.
No,
but fair enough. Yeah, that's it for now. So we have, like I say, overall score of 3.48. That's fairly decent. It's higher than I thought it was going to be.
3.5.
Yeah.
Half saint, half whore, you might say, if you're quoting the film. He's hoping I get the half that eats. That is a great line.
Can I ask a question? Right at the beginning of the film, there is a piece of music that I associate with Christmas.
Yeah.
Yes.
It gave me a strangely festive feeling.
But then it flips into some like Russian type vibe, doesn't it? And there's that refrain comes back a few times.
Yes, it does. It does.
So-
Why?
because
it's Russian.
Yeah.
It's Provocative, and it's like Russia. I don't think there's anything more sophisticated than that.
Okay, I thought there might be more resonance to it or a deeper meaning.
No, I'm doing
just
a Russian spoof.
thing.
We're in Russia.
Okay.
Here's a famous Russian song. I think it's that.
Fair enough.
Yeah.
Yeah, guys, can you let us know, and everyone listening, Jeff, where we can find you online, your Twitter handles and everything?
You can find me on Twitter and Instagram and slathered all over the internet at Alix Fox. That's ALIX, one I, like Cyclops, and then Fox, like the animal.
And I am at Olly Man, OLLYMANN. But much more important than flattering our individual egos is that you please go to whatever app you're using right now to listen to this podcast and subscribe to The Modern Man with 2 N's. It's a magazine show. It's not just about sex. We do trends. We have amazing life story interviews in there as well. And it would mean something to me, friends, if you tried the show and told your friends about it.
The interviews that Olly does are genuinely compelling as well. You've
we do have some
spoken
great
to
guests.
some really fantastic people. Everyone from criminals to a woman who works specifically with paedophiles to who else we've had, Olly? We've had some really funny ones as well.
The declutterer. She was really helpful.
Oh, was that useful for you? Yes, a woman decluttering expert. Yeah, learn how to file away your Woody Allen box set.
Yeah.
So go to The Modern Man, guys. If you're listening to this, you're listening on a podcast app, just
It's easy.
type in The Modern Man.
Just meander on down there.
Yeah. We'll see you guys next time.
Thanks for coming on.
Pleasure.
Bye.
Bye.
See ya.
Thanks for listening. You can find all of the episodes on our website, flixwatcher.tv. Want to give us your 5-star review? Follow us at FlixWatcherPod on Twitter. Big shout out to our editor, Brendan Russell, for all his awesome editing skills. And thanks as always to the mighty people for their tunes.